That's how I explain it.
That's really impressive.
That work?
How do you do it? How do you remember that verse? Like seriously, like memorize that? Because I'm sure you memorize other verses as well.
Yeah. I mean, for John 3:16, it's like the first thing you learn if you go like into kids ministry at church or like that. It's the thing they drill into you from the moment you can talk. It shares the faith really easily. But scripture memorization for me is not the easiest thing. But I do like to learn how to memorize things, and so I try to find chunks of scripture and memorize them just so I could be thinking about them throughout the day and not have to have my Bible in front of me.
I know, you're a walking Bible.
I wouldn't say that.
Hello, my name is Seha. I'm the creator of College Toke. It's a YouTube channel where I interview students and faculty from different colleges. And today I have David Reynolds. He is a high school pastor at a church called The Grove in Riverside, California. And David, you also went to Cal Baptist University, right?
That's right, yes sir.
That's good.
Go Lancers.
Go Lancers. You guys are D1?
D1 now, that's right.
Nice.
Going to the tournament in a couple years. It'll be exciting.
There you go.
See?
There you go. So David, I just want to get into it. First question. Do you know the most searched Bible verse on the internet?
No, I don't.
You don't.
If I had to guess, though, the most searched for Bible verse, Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you. Is that
That's
it?
definitely top 5. But out of all the searches, I looked at different ones. The most searched one is John 3:16.
Is it really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Do you know it by heart, Daniel or David?
I do know it by heart. Yeah, I do know it. Do you want me to say it?
Yeah, go ahead.
For God so loved the world.
So yes, say it and then tell me what it means.
Okay. So for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever shall believe in him will not perish but have eternal life. And it's the basic premise of the Christian faith that if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe that God sent him and believe that he rose from the dead, then you'll have salvation. And you won't spend eternity away from God in hell, but you'll spend eternity with him in heaven.
Wow.
That's how I explain it.
That's really impressive.
That work?
How do you do it? How do you remember that verse? Like seriously, like memorize that? Because I'm sure you memorize other verses as well.
Yeah. I mean, for John 3:16, it's like the first thing you learn if you go like into kids ministry at church or like that. It's the thing they drill into you from the moment you can talk. It shares the faith really easily. But scripture memorization for me is not the easiest thing. But I do like to learn how to memorize things, and so I try to find chunks of scripture and memorize them just so I could be thinking about them throughout the day and not have to have my Bible in front of me.
I know, you're a walking Bible.
I wouldn't say that.
So David, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me your testimony. And actually, can you explain what a testimony means for people who are not religious or even like never heard that word before?
Yeah, for sure. A testimony inside of the Christian faith is it's an acknowledgement of hey, this is what God has done in my life. It's the story of hey, how have you come to know Jesus and what is now different in your life. For me, my testimony, I grew up in a Christian family, which means that my parents went to church and raised us, bringing us to church every Sunday and every single Wednesday. But that didn't make me a believer. I don't believe that just because you're raised in a Christian home doesn't make you a Christian. But instead, it was for me, like when I made that decision to follow Jesus when I was 9 years old. That was the first time I understood it meant that I believed in Jesus and I believed that he rose from the dead. And so I knew that in that moment I was saved. But going a little further along, it wasn't until about my sophomore year of high school at a summer camp when I actually understood what it meant that Jesus had to come and he had to die on the cross for my sins. Because that's what Jesus did. He came and he made a payment for me that I couldn't make myself. And so that moment was like a big crisis for me of realizing it was like, oh my gosh, Jesus didn't just come because he loved me, but because he had to make a payment for me that I couldn't make. And that changed everything for me. And that was really the moment in my faith where I fully gave everything to Christ. And even throughout high school, I realized, okay, I need to give everything that I'm doing over to the Lord. So whether it's a sport, whether it's a student government, or whatever it was, man, I needed to realize that there's a bigger purpose in it. And so moving along throughout my faith, I've had other crisis moments where God really like draws me in closer. And even in college, I didn't go to Cal Baptist first. I went to Azusa Pacific, their arch nemesis. So I went there first. And then, but there was a moment when I was there, and I was still following the Lord, but man, there was a clear distance between me and Jesus because of a path that I decided to take of going here. I knew God was calling me somewhere different, but I decided to go here anyways. And there was a moment where I was sitting on the balcony in my apartment in my sophomore year, and I was reading the book of James, which is in the New Testament of the Bible, and the verse was, he who is just a hearer of the word and not a doer of the word is like one who looks at himself in the mirror and as soon as he walks away forgets what he looks like. And for me, it was crazy. God let that happen that morning, and I looked in the mirror for the first time. I felt like in forever, and I didn't recognize myself.
Really?
Went into reading that Bible and that verse in the Bible, and realized I could feel and I could hear God speaking to me and saying, David, why do you keep running from where I'm calling you? And that was another big moment where I realized, and I sat there and sobbed for 2 hours. I was like, okay, God, I'll go wherever you want me to go. And he ended up telling me, I want you to go into ministry, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But also, I need you to transfer schools. So I was like, seriously, both of these things,
Yeah.
But that's my testimony, is that God really did come in and change my entire life. Even though I grew up in a Christian home, I was still selfish. I was still prideful. I still had hate in my heart towards other people. But upon accepting and fully giving my life to the Lord, I could see God start to break and just to tear down this hardness inside my heart and to bring me closer to Him. And I'm nowhere near there yet. Even as a pastor, God is still doing work every single day. I still had angry thoughts for people today, and I could feel God just softening my heart and helping me see it from His point of view. I think it's a continual process, but that's my testimony.
Nice.
Yeah.
So when you made that decision to choose the path of ministry, how should I say this? So when you went to Azusa Pacific, were you actually already studying to be in ministry? What were you studying?
So that summer before, I brought a friend to church camp, saw him come to know Christ. I could feel God put on my heart to go into ministry. I still have the journal where I wrote pastor, really big, at a sermon, God was speaking to me. I told my high school pastor this is what he's doing. He's like, David, I see it. I've already told you this before. I see you going to ministry. I'm confirming this in you. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. Went back home, ended up not doing it because I was like, man, pastors don't make any money. I want to be able to put food on the table. So I was like, I'm going to go to school, be a dentist. So I survived one semester of studying biology, and I hated every single second of it. And so eventually I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that. I thought I'll go into public relations, and so I switched to journalism and PR at Azusa and was pursuing that and really enjoyed it. But then again, I came back home again to serve with our high school ministry just as a volunteer. And during that summer, I had a group of guys and again saw a couple of students come to know Christ, and God, I could feel that calling again. And that time, it was so clear to me that time. So I decided to run a little bit more, go one more semester at Azusa, and that's when I had that moment on the balcony, and God changed it, and I decided to stop running from where God was telling me to go. And so that's what was the big decision. And then the next natural step was to go to Cal Baptist because they have one of the best undergraduate programs for young people wanting to go into ministry.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that was definitely a big jump, big leap, especially from trying to be a dentist. That's definitely a path that a lot of people are kind of serious on.
For sure.
Yeah, but I'm glad you chose ministry.
Me too.
So, what is your favorite part about being a high school pastor, David?
Favorite parts. I have a lot of favorite parts, and I mean that. It's not just hey, everybody loves their job, right? I really do love what I get to do. My absolute favorite thing is seeing students come to know Jesus. Yes, that's a huge part of it, but really I love seeing students fall more in love with Jesus. And that happens through a process, of seeing them come to fall in love more with God and then fall in love with His bride, which is the church. And we could talk about that, but I love to see students just jump into serving and really being a part of the church and taking their faith seriously. Even in high school, when it's not an easy thing to do, especially our students that go to public schools. Man, they are constantly with bad influence after bad influence. The second you step out of your car in the parking lot, And a lot of our students go to the same high school that I grew up going to, so I've got some insight into that. And so getting to see our students take their faith seriously and pursue it, man, that's one of my favorite parts.
That's cool. So when you say, for someone who's not religious, who have never seen a single word in the Bible, what does it mean to be for someone to love Jesus? do you see that in a student to be able to practice that?
That's a good question, Chris. Wow. I believe that God calls us to two things, and that's to know Him and to make Him known. I mean, it's to love your Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and your soul, and to love your neighbor. It's a command that Jesus gives us in the Gospels. But it also is that we don't just hold that in, but that we let that out to all those that are around us. Before Jesus ascended into heaven after rising from the dead, which is, again, a basic premise of what we believe as Christians, He gave us this command, and it's to go and to make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to live in observance of all that I've commanded them. That's God's mission for us. So every single believer, regardless of whatever career path you have, we all share a similar purpose, and that's to know God and to fall more in love with Him, and then to go and to make Him known. And so to love Jesus is to know Him and to help others know Him too. And so that's what I look for in students. For me, a big mark of maturity inside of a student's faith is, it's actually really kind of silly, but inside of my conversations with them, I can see them start to change and grow when they stop. Like, I'll always ask questions. I have 1,000 questions I'll ask them. Is when they stop and slow down and they start asking me questions. And they're like, hey, David, how do you see this in your walk? How are you doing? Because it shows me that they're starting to realize, like, hey, it's not just about me. It's about something that's bigger than myself. When I see a student start to bring their friends and tell their friends about who Jesus is to church and bring them to church, like, that's another huge mark. Is that, hey, that's a student that's taking their relationship with God seriously, and they're falling more in love with Him too.
I like that. I like the mark of maturity.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, it rolls off the tongue.
It's not mine. I stole it from someone else. I don't know who, so I can't quote him.
I love it. Especially like seeing someone where you know they're starting to grow up. It's just like, I don't know. It's the beautiful thing, you know?
For sure.
So we're living in a weird time, David. How has COVID-19 affected you?
Yeah. Well, it's upended everything that we do. All of our ministry is really surrounded around gathering. You know, we gather on Wednesdays and Sundays. And so back in March, I think it was March 16th or so, is when the stay-at-home order in California went into effect. And that effectively shut down everything. So all of our campuses, not our campuses, but all of the ministries inside of our church were completely shut down. So no one was coming into the building from that point forward. And so we had to adjust really quickly to doing everything online. And so we keep saying, thank God that this has happened in 2020 and not we're not in 1918 with the Spanish flu or something like that, because we have things like Zoom. You know, we've got YouTube, we've got the ability to stream everything that we were doing. We're able to continue to do it just in small groups of people, which is a large part of the model that we do as a church already. Is it's surrounded around small groups. And so it's not just, hey, come into this big church of this big sanctuary of 1,700 people and listen to this word, but man, it's like, yeah, do that, but then you go in your small groups and you start living that out. And so that was already built into our culture of who we are. So really it was just taking what we do on campus and then just making it digital, which sounds like, hey, that's really easy to say, but we have an amazing team at our church that was able to help accomplish that over the last few weeks. But it's been really hard, even over the past few weeks. First few weeks were fun. It was new. It was different. Yeah. But Zoom fatigue is a very real thing. And if I have to have one more Zoom conversation, I think I might die. You know, like, I'm so over having these conversations. I crave to have that connection with someone and to be close with people. Because I think that's how God created us to communicate. Mm-hmm. So yeah, digital communication, it's a huge blessing. But man, we're ready for it to be done.
So are you preaching in front of a camera or?
Preaching in front of a camera, yes.
How's that?
Which, I mean, I think for other people on our staff who are more wise in years, it's a little bit more difficult, but I'm also, I grew up with Instagram culture, you know, so we're kind of used to all of us talking to our phone, and that's just a camera, so it's been a little bit easier, I think, for me to adjust, because I'm realizing it's like, hey, I'm trying to envision that camera is a real person. We try to name the camera so that we're talking to them and it doesn't feel so unnatural, but it's been difficult, but it's been an adjustment, and I think starting to get better every week.
Nice. And so I heard you talking about small groups a little bit. Mm-hmm. For someone, you know, again, who's like never gone to church, has never even heard the term small group, what does that mean to the growth in you guys? Absolutely.
So, I mean, small group is literally just a small group of people. So at a bigger church like ours, which has about 4,000 people, the way that we can make sure that we're taking care of everyone within our church is by encouraging people to be a part of a small group, which is anywhere from 10 to 20 people that will meet weekly. They'll discuss the week's message, and they'll really learn to do life together. So for even a small group that I get to be a part of, it's a group of people that have committed to sharing everything about themselves with each other, about being honest with each other about where they're at, whether there's sin inside of their life or whether things are going bad. And it's the type of people that you'll pour into, and they'll pour into you as well. And that's the way we make a big church of 4,000 people feel really small, is that we've got all these small groups, which are really just small churches, that meet throughout the week and continue to shepherd and take care of each other.
So it sounds like a pretty nice way to meet, like peaceful people.
For sure.
Definitely, especially if you're coming into like a new city and
it's needed.
I guess I'll join a church.
I don't know how you would even get connected if you didn't have a small group, because otherwise you're just going into a big room with a bunch of other people every week.
Yeah.
It's a necessity for sure.
Nice. All right, David. So you went to CBU and you studied ministry, right?
Yep. The program was called Applied Theology, but
Applied Theology.
Ministry is the main focus of it.
Okay, but the way they market it is Applied
Theology. Right. So it was like the whole point of their degree is they want to give you a seminary level and type of studying of theology, but then it's entirely focused not just having the knowledge, but hey, how can you apply it within the local church? It's a really unique program for just undergraduate. Like usually you can get this kind of education at a seminary, but to be offered it at an undergraduate level was a really cool opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I've never really heard of that.
Yeah,
to
right.
be honest, so I definitely think it's really cool. Do they the CBU market this program? At, like college fairs and stuff like that in high school, or? Yeah,
they do market it. It's more they market it within the local church because they're trying to get church leaders to be a part of it. Yeah. And so applied theology. Theology is the study of God. And then applied, obviously, is how do you apply the study of God within the local church. That way it's not just, hey, I know things, but it's, hey, I know things, and this is how we can apply it to help people know God more.
Yeah.
So they definitely market it. It's more within the local churches. And then it's an application process to even be a part of that program that you have to go through, and it's an interview and things like that because they do give you some help with scholarship and things like that to be a part of it.
So can you explain the class structure? So explain were there a lot of lectures? Were there a lot of public speaking? What was the content like? Were you doing a lot of literature, reading, all that stuff? Just explain to me what was classes like.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's similar to what a lot of students go through if you go a history major, in that you're doing a lot of reading. You're reading a ton of whether it's old theology, or newer studies of theology. Lots of lectures, things like that, especially towards the beginning. And then as you get throughout the program, you start to have more applicational of now you're going to preach a sermon, right? Because if you're going to ministry, you're learning how to preach and communicate. And so we have a few preaching classes that you take, a lot of papers. So it's a really similar structure. But for me, I think what was so unique is that the class sizes were pretty small. There was only 15 kids in the program for each year. And so what that offered us is that the class size was so small that we really got to know our professors. And so, you learned and you had a course plan that you're following. But the moments in between classes and the moments after classes where you got to know your professors and see their hearts and see that they weren't just professors for the sake of being professors, but they really cared about the church and cared about building up leaders for the church. That's what made CBU so special, is that relationship that you're able to build with your professors. I mean, even after graduating, the little cohort that I have, we just went to a professor's house a couple months ago that we graduated with, and we just hung out with him and his family and talked about life, and that was what was so special about that program in Cal Baptist.
So it's definitely like a small group.
Yeah, another small group. There you go. Yeah, real life happens in small groups. That's cool.
Interesting. So are your professors, are they also pastors too from local churches, or? Yeah,
actually, the majority of them are. That's what was, again, really cool, is that they weren't just talking about the church, but they were still in the church, and so they either pastored a church themselves or were interim pastors. So in between pastors, they'll go and they'll step in and preach and help lead the church until they find the next person. Almost all of them did that, but all of them were involved in the local church in some way or another, which was really cool.
Nice. So can you tell me a favorite thing about CBU? I think you might have already mentioned it.
Mm-hmm.
But what is also one thing that grinds your gears about CBU?
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Favorite thing is absolutely this class sizes that we were offered, and just those intimate moments with the professors where they cared about you. They knew your name eventually, right? They had big classes still, but man, they got to know you, and they really cared about who you were as a person. All of our professors, there were moments where we'd be going through, I took a class, I had to take a language, and so the Bible was written in 2 different languages, primarily Greek and then Hebrew. Hebrew is for the Old Testament. Mm-hmm. And so you have to take 2 years of language inside of this program. And so I took Hebrew like a fool. And there's only 6 of us that did that. But there were moments where our professor would really just slow us down. And I remember specifically a moment where I was talking about just got engaged to my longtime girlfriend from high school, and I was just talking about, man, engagement's so hard. Like, I just want to be married already. And he really took a 2-hour class time and just talked to us about marriage and talked to us about engagement. And he's like, David, don't have that attitude towards it. And it really changed my perspective. It's like, you want to be challenged. Like, use this time to grow. Don't let it just be hey, I'm just going to wait to pursue my future wife until I'm actually married. Like, start pursuing her now. And the fact that he took a time to do that when we're supposed to be like reading and studying Hebrew, which none of us really wanted to do, we had to do it. But the fact that he took the time, man, there's so many moments like that. Grind my gears about CBU, dude, that's a hard question. Every school has, going to 2 different universities, man, CBU cared about their students. You get a lot out of the student experience for your money. I don't have anything that makes me look back and say, like, man, that was so dumb, there just isn't that from Cal Baptist in my experience.
That's good to hear.
I don't have it. I'm sorry. No, I don't know if that helps you.
Perfect. That helps you, definitely. So you were engaged during college?
My last year, yes.
Last year.
It was crazy. It was a lot of fun, but it was crazy.
Were you, nervous at all?
Nervous? It was just so much change happening in that year because I was starting to step into a full-time role and getting married and finishing school and graduating. So
your mark of maturity was, I'm sure.
It was going up. Yes. I learned a lot. I matured a lot in that year. Nervous to get married? No. It was just I was ready. We'd been dating for 5.5 years up to that point, so we're like, we just want to get married. So it was cool.
Good for you.
Wouldn't trade it.
Nice. So continuing on, you're done with CBU.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me the duties and responsibilities of a high school pastor? So, give me an example, like when you wake up in the morning and
for sure. Well, first thing, high school pastors, all they do is really just play games with their students and just play bago and stuff. No, I'm kidding. No, that's what a lot of people think. Like, oh, you're a youth pastor, you just go play games with kids and keep them quiet. But it's a lot of my job, you think, is, okay, you're preparing the message, which that's true. Each message takes about 16 to 20 hours to prepare, and on average, you're doing 2 a week most of the time, so that's a lot. But honestly, I would say 70 to 80% of my job is administrative and finding ways. We have a bigger youth group, and so it's about 200 students, and so creating events and things for them to invite their friends to, all of that is a lot. So every week we have a staff meeting. I have about 5 people that I get to work on a team with for high school ministry. And so leading that staff meeting and getting those things going, planning out weeks ahead for different events. We hold a summer camp that we do all ourselves. We just rent out a facility, and so that takes about 6 months of planning to get ready for, and about 50 volunteers and thousands of hours working together to make that happen. But week to week, I disciple students. So discipling, again, if you didn't grow up or you're not a Christian, discipling is helping students become more like Jesus and walking them alongside that path or during that journey. And so I take students under my wing and we'll walk them through what it means to be a man of God and follow Jesus and read the Bible. And so I do that a couple of mornings out of the week, every week, and that takes a lot of time, but also just encouraging our leaders. So we have about 30 leaders that lead our students. Our ministry can't happen. I can't lead 200 students, but we have amazing leaders who but one of them takes on 10 to 12 students, and they really pour into them and help them, again, disciple them and help them become more like Christ. So that's a lot of what my job is. A lot of it's administrative. A lot of it is parent emails. Parents need help with raising their kids, and it's kind of funny when they're asking a 24-year-old, like, hey, how do I raise my kid? It's like, I don't know. I don't, barely married right now, but trying to just work alongside and partner with them in raising their kids is a large part of the job too.
I see. Actually, one thing I'm pretty curious about, what are churches looking for a young, a young student fresh out of college, who wants to become a high school pastor? Like, well, I don't know, what makes you different from the other guys?
I don't think different. I think something that churches, being on this side of it, being in this role for a few times, and even being a part of hiring now, is things that we look for. We don't want people that think they know everything, because even if you have a degree, you don't know anything. I learned more in my first year of being a high school pastor than I did practically even in the 4 years in a program that was supposed to be practical. You just do. It's just part of it. And so we look for a humbleness inside of you. We look for an authentic love for the Lord. Like, that's the biggest thing that we look for, is that they really love Jesus. We want someone that's a learner, that, again, doesn't know everything but is willing to learn culture. We want the people that don't use youth ministry specifically as a stepping stone. I've never used being a high school pastor, hey, I'm just going to do this for a little while until I can get to that next step. I know God's put me here. We want people that say, hey, God's put me here for a reason, and I'm going to chase after this for as long as he has me in this season. So looking for people who are going to take their role, and they're just going to take the people that are involved in it, and they're just going to love them and push them towards Christ.
So you're telling me it doesn't matter about GPA, doesn't matter the amount of work they put in?
No, not necessarily. I don't think that I was never asked.
Helps. Who has like a 2.0.
Exactly. You gotta have a degree to be a pastor within our church. So you definitely have to pass your classes. But it wasn't the first question on my interview of, hey, what's your GPA? They care again more about your love for Christ and your ability to understand the Word. And at our school, if you were able to do those things, you were gonna have a high GPA anyways. So it kind of worked out and correlated well.
So as a high school pastor, I'm sure you have, a lot of leadership responsibilities. Who do you have people that look up to you, David?
That look up to me?
Yeah.
It's a hard question, Chris. I think I've got students that I'm helping, again, come to know who Christ is more, that I think look up to me. I have people that I look up to, and the things that I looked up to them for were their love for the Lord. Was how they led inside of a relationship. If they were married, like, how did they love their wives, and how did they lead the people that were around them? Was it all about them? Were they constantly talking about themselves and how great they were, or were they constantly trying to help other people get better? So I looked at those people and said, I want to be like that, and I try to do that myself today, and I hope that other people would look at that and say, I want to do the same thing, because I think that's what it means to follow Christ, is to not be by yourself, but to look at others too. So
who are the people that you look up to, and why have you chosen those people?
I've got a lot of different people, both like far off that I just observe from a distance, but then close. We have an amazing high school pastor when I was growing up. That was my junior high pastor, and I got to move up along when he went up to high school, and he's now the lead pastor of our entire church. His name is Daniel, and I love that guy. He's been a father figure to me. He's been a brother figure to me. He's been my pastor. He's been my friend. And I love getting to serve under him, because, again, just the same things that I hope, man, he loves Jesus. He leads his family well. And he cares about helping other people grow more than putting his own name in the limelight. Like, if you try to get this guy to be a part of interviews, he fights it. He's like, no, find someone else. Like, my stories it's not about me. He says that probably at least 10 times a day in our interactions, Because even being a pastor of a big church, there's a stigma there. But the way that man leads is unreal. If I could be half the leader he is someday, I'll be happy, And so I follow after that guy and look what he does, and tries to I try to copy it in a lot of ways, Not trying to be him. I know God created me to be me, but at the same time, like, there's a lot of things that he does that I think all of us can learn from and follow after. I've got another person who, again, just discipled me throughout high school, and his name is Destin, and he just taught me what it means to be a man and to take ownership, and a lot of life lessons, but also just how to follow the Lord and be humble before the Lord. And I do look up to my dad too in a lot of ways, and he's not perfect. He's made mistakes as a Christian, but the way he's even responded to those mistakes, I look up to and admire a lot. So there are a lot of people I look up to. I don't think we have enough time to even keep on with that list, but I've had a lot of great people that poured into me and that I look up to.
Yeah, that's good.
preachers.
What is your least favorite thing about being a high school pastor?
Least favorite.
Least favorite.
Okay, I really love my job. I love doing like everything about it. I really do. But there are certain seasons where, things can become miscommunicated, and whether that's just on my part, I wasn't clear enough in my communication, or students aren't clear in their communication to their parents, and sometimes things come up where there just are clear miscommunications, and so those situations, they're always really long and they're draining, and almost every single time it comes back to like, hey, something was just miscommunicated, and it was never like, hey, this person's a bad person or this, but that's how it ends up looking. And so those seasons are always hard, but honestly, there's not that much I don't like. I really love what I do.
Nice. Tell me why you do this. What can you tell to someone who is watching and persuade them to be a high school pastor?
Why do I do this? I felt a calling, and I know that I'm following in that calling that God's put on my life. I think everybody has callings that God puts on them and puts on their hearts for their lives. And the people that I know that are living within those callings, a lot of them aren't even within the church, but they have the same feeling and the same love for what they do. I have a friend that's a cop and loves what he does. A friend that's inside of construction management and loves what he does. He really feels that calling towards it because that's where God has placed them. I'd say, man, you have to have that calling, because when times are really hard, because in every job and every ministry and working in ministry, there are going to be seasons where it's really, really tough. And you'll have to ask that question, like, why am I doing this? The things that you fall back on are that calling. Those are the moments where I fall back and say, you know what? God called me this. He called me here. I know I'm going to keep going. Even though this is really hard, even though the situation is really difficult, even though it feels like what I'm doing doesn't even matter or it's not even making a difference, man, I know that God's put me here, and I know He'll see me. He'll see me through this, and He will use me in this situation. And so I would say make sure you have that calling. And for anybody that wants to, once you do it, man, go all in. Be all about the ministry that you're in. Don't use this as a stepping stone. If it's youth ministry especially, don't use it as like, I'm just going to do this until I can be a senior pastor. It's like, man, first off, being a senior pastor doesn't even look like that much fun, to be honest, from what I see. But also, like, man, don't use it as a stepping stone, because your students will feel that. And they'll feel that you're just there to serve your own needs and to push your own agenda. But be there for your students, and focus on coming in and learning, and really learning wherever God places you, whatever church it is, and trust that God will use you every single step of the way. That's what I'd say. But do it, man. Ministry is worth it. If God's put it on your calling, don't run away from it, man. Of course, we don't make that much money. That's all right. But every single time, man, we've been in need. Like, God has showed up. There's never been a time that we've even had to go without. God just shows up, whether it's by people in the church that bless us or whatever it is. We've never had a situation where we're just like, oh no, like God didn't provide for us. God always does provide. So don't listen to those lies that the enemy uses to keep you out of it. But if God's called you to it, man, run full speed towards it.
All right. So David, what is your next step?
What's my next step?
In terms of your career, as a pastor, tell us your next step.
Yeah. Again, I'm really passionate about not using youth ministry as a stepping stone. So I don't have a next step. A couple things I know. I really, really don't think I want to be a senior pastor. I was kind of joking earlier, but I really, really don't think I want to do that. Yeah. Again, I get to see and get to see really closely what that's like. And I don't feel that calling in my life right now. Could God put it there someday? Maybe. But right now, I love just getting to be a number 2 person and support the senior pastor and the vision that God has put on his heart for our church and for our community of believers, in that vision of knowing him and that purpose of knowing him and making him known. So right now, I'm loving where I'm at. And the next step for me is just to continue to be faithful in that. And wherever God leads me, my plan is to try and be faithful. And I'm married really well, and my wife and I, we really... I know that she has that heart, that wherever God leads us, we're going to go. And if it's clear that God wants us there, then we'll run full speed into that. And so that's our plan. That's the next step, is just to continue on in that, and wherever God decides to call us, we'll go.
So last question, just tell me one last piece of advice or wisdom that you could share. This is literally about anything whether if it's like a life question, family question,
Yeah.
something other than your career.
For sure.
Yeah.
I was taught at a young age, I think this is a reason I even have a job, was wherever you're going, do it with purpose. I was always told walk with purpose. I had a football coach that taught us, like, whatever you're running for, going from drill to drill, don't be the person that's walking, be the person that's running. Be at the front of every single line, something that my dad taught me. Why is because it shows that you care. So even if you don't always know where you're going, man, just run full speed, and eventually God will put you where you need to be. And I think that's served me well, even in working in jobs. I worked at Chick-fil-A for a year, and I loved it. But one time the owner sat me down, and we had a Chick-fil-A sandwich, of course. And he was like, David, it just seems like you always know where you're going when you're walking. I was like, honestly, sir, I don't. He's like, that's okay. He's like, but you act like you do, and I see that, and it shows that you care about what you're doing. So, man, wherever it is that you're in, man, walk with purpose. Do whatever you're doing right now with your whole heart. Don't do it haphazardly. Trust that God will use it to shape you, even if it's not the best thing that you want to be doing right now, but you just keep doing it. And I promise that God will use it someday, even if it's just as a lesson. So walk with purpose.
Walk with purpose. Nice. Well, David, thank you so much. Those are all the questions I have for you. This is David Reynolds. He is a high school pastor at the Grove, and he completed his education at Cal Baptist University. David, thank you so much, man.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
For the audience.
Cool, man. Thank you
this
so
is a
much.
big production.
There's a live audience.
That's awesome.